Roger Sparks is back. Many of you met Roger when he was here as an STM, 2 years ago, Roger?
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
In Waupun, and did a wonderful job leading that congregation to where they are now with Healthy Place with Pastor Kurt at Bethel, and now back in Classis, Wisconsin at Covenant CRC up in Appleton. So welcome back, Pastor Roger.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be back in the classes.
When we last saw you on this program, the 10 of us who watch it, we were saying goodbye and you were headed out to Bangor, Maine. Can you just catch us up how that experience was and how you ended up back in Wisconsin?
Yeah, we had a year-long assignment there, and it was very interesting place to be in terms of the location and just being on the East Coast. My wife and I had never really been to Maine and spent any time in that area. It was a challenging call in some ways. It's a very small church there that had been through a rough patch with their pastor. Of course, that's why they were looking for an STM to come in and provide some guidance and stability, and just to help them get a process of searching for a pastor going. So it was a good experience. We felt, the distance from our own family and so forth when we moved out there. But being a small group, we were able to connect and form good relationships with people. And once it came time for us to leave, we actually missed it. I could say more than we at first thought we would, because of the wonderful connection and good fellowship we had with the group there. They're actually still looking for a pastor, and because they haven't been able to find a CRC pastor willing, able, sensing a call to serve in that area, they're actually looking at pulling out of the CRC and joining the PCA, where apparently there is more of an abundance of pastoral candidates who might be willing to help them out. So that's an interesting sort of footnote to our service there. They looked hard and they contacted a lot of potential CRC pastors, but it looks like that's how God is leading them to continue as a church in the Reformed/Presbyterian tradition, and to be able to acquire a pastor who will be able to work with them too and lead them in the faith. So that's a little snapshot of our work in Bangor, Maine.
And then now you find yourself back in Wisconsin. Pastor Mark Plummer, beloved at Covenant and also at the classical level, takes a new call to Minnesota, and Covenant is in need of a STM, and so they go looking and find a friendly, familiar face in Roger Sparks. How has your time in Appleton been?
Oh, it's good. We started already the beginning of last March, so we've been here 9.5, going on 10 months. So we've gotten to know the folks here pretty well too. Although, if everybody in the church filed past, I wouldn't be able to come up with all their names. It's like they walk faster than their names. So I have to ask people still their names sometimes. But we're enjoying, again, the fellowship, getting to know fellow believers, functioning as a pastor. Part of the work here is creating some space between, like you said, their beloved former pastor who was here many years, and whomever it is God will call to serve here next. And so, there's, I guess you'd have to call it grief, a sense of loss, when he, who is a very skilled and very well-spoken pastor, took a call and left. Also, there was another pastor on staff here who also departed about that time. And so the congregation had sort of a double layer of grief. But then, too, as the group started looking to the future and trying to chart where they felt God was calling them, it became one sort of shared the vision for what Covenant Church was going to be going forward. And so there were a number of other families that saw it fit to find church fellowship and membership in other churches in the area. So it's like the congregation here has been through several layers of grief, losing Pastor Mark, and then their associate pastor, and then a number of families and children. So they've had to really stop and look at who's sort of like who's left, what demographics are there, what is this going to mean for children's ministries, and so forth. So it's been a real time of reflection, but I also think it's been a time of renewing trust in God and in His plan, which includes congregations as well as individuals. Mm-hmm. So we've been here helping them work through that, recognizing that that's what's going on, and just also being present to preach and to provide guidance for the council and especially the search team that's been working a lot of hours and still in process. But that's just a little bit of a snapshot of what it's been here in Covenant. There's a huge amount of talent in the congregation, musically and so forth. And so it's really quite amazing how when people use their gifts, and whether it's a great talent or not, but when they use their gifts and work together, whether it's in worship or in other ways, it's just amazing and kind of beautiful thing how God uses that to inspire as well, and just to build each other up in the way of faith. So
yeah, you're anticipating my next question some. I mean, I imagine just by nature of common creeds and confessions and some shared traditions that there's some commonalities at each stop along your way as a specialized transitional minister. But then you would also expect different places, different states, different regions of the country, different groups of people. There's also some unique gifts, unique things. If I remember correctly, one of the things you mentioned being a strength at Bethel was this commitment to teaching students, raising up young people. If you had to kind of name a couple key strengths at Covenant CRC, what are you, in your 10 months there, kind of recognizing as, hey, here's what we're doing really well?
Well, I think it is a group that cares for one another, and that's certainly a strength. There are multiple, as well as Sunday worship services. There are multiple, you might call them small group Bible studies that meet throughout the week. So there are opportunities. There's men groups, there's women's groups. And then there's adult Sunday school, as well as Sunday school for children and young people. So I think that's a real strength, in spite of the fact that there have been, these losses of pastor and members that I mentioned. It is still a very cohesive group, and people are willing to share and pray for one another and really try to encourage each other. I also think the congregation has a strength that is, I think, going to be developed in the future, maybe more than it has been, which is there's a desire also to be a little more deliberately outward looking, with a revised vision statement and so forth that'll be a little more specific in mentioning that we are called to not only know Christ, but also to share Christ with our neighbors and with the world. So it's it's um, it's a good thing to have that sense of we've been through maybe a rough patch, but God is preserving us, and we have a sense that He is calling us also to make a difference in the community. Kind of a neat thing going on here is that the congregation here at Covenant shares their building with a group of Congolese, that's immigrants from Africa, believers. And so every Sunday afternoon, the building is being used by the Congolese group. It's a local church that is formed among refugees and immigrants who've settled in the area. And that's really an exciting thing to see that. And there's starting to be a little more actual participation, in spite of language differences and so forth, between the two groups. And one of the projects we have going now at Covenant is to help the group actually acquire Bibles from the Bible Society in Rwanda in Africa, in the language that many of the adults here in the Congolese group speak. So I mean, they're not English speakers, so they can't just go to a bookstore and buy a Bible and take it home and read it. So we kind of figured this out the last few months, that this would be a real neat opportunity for us as a congregation to help them, just to put more Bibles in their hands in a language they can read. And so that's a little project we have going right now. So I think that's a strength too, that the congregation here at Covenant, when it sees a need like that, it doesn't say, "Wow, that's too hard. We could never do that." No, they roll up their sleeves and they prayerfully consider how they can work together to make things like that happen. So that's really neat to see that unfolding, even right now.
Yeah. Roger, can you give us something of a timeline where Covenant's at in this process? Has it been about 1 year since Pastor Mark, about this time of year, or two now?
Yeah, he left about, I think it was right before Thanksgiving last year, or maybe right after Thanksgiving. So it's been a little more than a year that he's been not serving here. And so, yeah, they're coming up on more than 1 year. And it's interesting how, people who really appreciated him spoke very highly of Pastor Mark and his preaching. And, obviously they were missing him, but I think they've also, instead of sort of holding on to the past, they've also been able to start looking to the future. And so that's a good thing, to appreciate the past, but be able to look to the future is very important, I think, for all of us in many settings. So they're at a year, and our year here will be up, Lord willing, the end of February. And whether or not after a break we would resume work here in an interim basis or not, my wife and I are prayerfully considering that too, and discussing that as well with the leadership here. So when you start a year assignment like this, it's like a year's a long time, but then you get about halfway through and it's like, it's really going fast. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
So
now remind me, when our congregation had a beloved pastor leave about 15 years ago, it took, I think, 3 years for us to call the next pastor. The timeline was near 2 years at Bethel CRC in Waupun as well. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So these things, a year goes by fast, and a lot of decisions, have to be stacked up in place in time. So,
Yeah, and I do think it is, in general, from what I understand, it is a challenging time for many churches who are looking for pastors. I think there's not a superabundance of like extra pastors that a church can just contact and he's coming, 3 months later or something like that. So it is challenging. And so I would say the 2 year to the 3 year vacancies are not uncommon anymore. And so the work of interims is much appreciated, it seems like, in churches where we're able to plug in and help out.
Yeah. I get emails from Jim from time to time about pulpit supply. That's one way that if you're watching and you've got the blessing of the classes to do some preaching and pulpit filling, it's one way you could support Covenant at this time. Other ways that we could pray for or support Covenant in this interim period?
Yeah, just pray for the work of the search team in looking for a new pastor. And you could also pray that in the discussions about vision and a looking to the future, that would be something that's just a very cohesive thing. Once you get a whole bunch of people together in a room, if you say, what shall we do? You could get a whole bunch of different answers too. But so far, it's been a really good and I think unifying discussion with the leadership. And so just pray that continues as individually and then as groups and then as a congregation. They look forward to finding and experiencing the future that God has for them. Sometimes when I write out maybe it's congratulations, you just graduated from high school card, I'll write something like that on there. I'll just say, may God bless you as you step into the future that God has for you. And I just like that as a way to, as a good perspective on the future, whether it's a high school grad or a congregation. God does have a future in mind for us, and so we look to Him to bless us as step by step we move into the future that He already has charted for us. So just pray that those sorts of things for Covenant Church, the search for a new pastor, unity going forward, and that we can be a blessing not only to the Congolese group that meets in our building, but also to the community here in Appleton.
For those of you who don't know, in Classis Wisconsin, we've kind of broken ourselves up into 3 regions, we call them. There's a South region. South is a loose term because it includes Madison and Milwaukee, but there's a Central region, which Roger was a part of last time he was here, and then a North region, which Oostburg and Sheboygan and Appleton is part of. So Roger, it's been nice getting to know you more deeply because we get together more often since we're in the same region here. And Classis Wisconsin is thankful for your double service and I think when you weren't here, you came as a synodical deputy. Am I remembering correctly? Or while you were here, you were synodical deputy from?
Actually, I was here as a synodical deputy several years ago, and the meeting was actually here in Covenant Church in Appleton. So I had actually been in this building before, and while I was serving as an interim in Bethel in Waupun, I also was still wearing my synodical deputy hat from where my credentials are held. So once in a while, I was sort of like the resident synodical deputy.
Yeah.
So I'd be visiting the meetings of Classis anyway. So if they needed a deputy, I was easy to get a hold of at that time.
Well, Roger, thanks for your time today, and thanks for your service at Covenant.
You're welcome. Blessings to you too.